Welcome to Transformed by Grief. My name is Ellie Thomas, and I am here to guide you on your transformational grief journey. From feeling lost, raw, and brokenhearted, questioning everything in you and around you, to reconnecting to the truth of who you are and the beauty, fulfillment, and vibrancy of life that is still available in you and through you. On this podcast, we explore the depths of what it means to say yes to life again after you've been broken open by pain and grief. We will explore what it means to create a deep, loving, and reverent relationship to yourself, to grief, and to life in a way that allows you to begin to rebuild from the inside out and to create a powerful foundation for a joy-filled, alive feeling and fulfilling life you love. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. I'm so glad to be here with you, podcasting again. Welcome to 2025, Transformed by Grief in 2025. Whew. You want to take a breath with me? I always love that about when I started this show as the fountain. Almost every episode starts with inviting you to take a breath with me and to tap in and to connect with our flow. What wants to come through, what wants to be spoken, what wants to be received, what wants to be acknowledged. Yeah, that almost brings me to tears. I'm just so grateful to have been doing this and to be sharing with you. And today I have such a special episode that, thank the audio gods on the internet, I was able to clean up and edit because this is a raw, beautiful, powerful transmission that I recorded in my car this week. And I'll say a little bit more about it in the episode, but I've really been feeling into over the past few months the pulse of the podcast. I could feel me stepping into my next era as a leader and a guide in the transformational grief world and beyond. And I could feel the way that the world is causing grief to be at the surface constantly and how much people are needing spaces to connect with it in a new way and how much our souls are craving it. And yet there was, of course, I'm human, so much of my humanness and my journey and my life to keep living and being informed by. And as all of that was working together, as Melina and I were collaborating on our first sacred ground gatherings, as the stability, the heart of the sanctuary membership was solidifying even more towards the end of the year, and as just clarity was coming on many levels, I was sinking in, tuning in, connecting with constantly. I can feel the podcast. I can feel it still alive. I can feel it still wants more energy, attention to be able to communicate and offer so much more. And yet the clarity of what exactly that was hadn't landed yet. And then this week it did. And it happened to be in a moment where I needed to get in the car. And I was like, you know what? I am going to honor this impulse, this clarity, whatever wants to come through right now. And I am going to hit record. And then I got it ready for you. And when I was listening to it, I'm like, this just isn't good enough. Like, what I'm saying is incredible. It is deep medicine. It needs to be out in the world. The energy of this is profound. And at the same time, this audio needs to be way better. And thank all the advancements in technology, I was able to update it and clean it up so much for you. And so it can finally make it to your ears without being annoying, and it can sink into the heart and into the body and be felt. And I really have that prayer for this transmission today, for this beginning of the Transformed by Grief podcast in 2025, for the heart of this work to meet you wherever you are, to awaken what needs to be awakened in you, and to guide you in your awareness of the best right next steps for you, what you're needing, and what is possible for you and in you when you say yes to your grief and to all of the parts that it is wanting to guide you back to. So, a few things I want to say here before I give you the transmission. The first is that I talk about masculine and feminine polarities here and the divine masculine and divine feminine archetypes. And I first want to say, if you are not from the spiritual healing realms, these terms don't really matter. What matters is that we can feel into the subtleties of it. And like I said, they are archetypes and they are opposites that, as I speak to in the episode, over time come together to create wholeness. And this has nothing to do with gender. These polarities, these archetypes, these energies are alive in each and every one of us, no matter how we identify, no matter what bodies we are living in. So if that language does not feel quite right for you or you are confused about that, please just think of those as archetypes and maybe look towards the world and ways where those are portrayed to understand them more. And if you would like me to talk more about it, reach out and I can share more. Related to that, I also say in the episode some things around how many people that I have worked with have our inner masculinity overdeveloped. And again, these are traits, tendencies, things that the world asks of us, things that activate in times of emergency, of survival and need. And they are also very natural and important executive parts of us and really powerful movers and shapers of our lives. And I speak to how many people that I work with don't necessarily have their femininity developed. And this can be confusing because when we're thinking about it in relationship to gender, which the only reason we would do that would be because of the words that are being used, it can be confusing because you can identify, like I did, as an extremely feminine woman and also somebody that didn't feel fully expressed and fully alivened and fully connected to everything that stood for deep within me on a archetypal spiritual level. So I want to throw out there to not hold on too much and not worry too much about the terms and just let the energy and let the awareness notify you in your system of how this lands and let it kind of wash over you and see what it feels, see what you notice, see what comes up for you. Like, what are the places that you're saying, yeah, I really did overdevelop this, or I really had to. And yeah, there really wasn't space for this part of me. And now that part of me is wanting to come alive. So I wanted to give some context to that. Secondly, I wanted to update you on some of the beautiful things happening in LA Flow Land because this episode might move you to wanting a place to land, to bring what's being activated and awakened. And so the first place to look for that is our sacred ground ceremonies for grief and growth that Melina and I have now led 4 of, and we are doing monthly on the 3rd Sunday of each month. So we have one coming up in about 2 weeks from when this airs, and they are $33 each to join, and you can just come exactly as you are. We have a tea ceremony together. I lead a grief flow, and then we have time for community connection, witnessing, integration, space to ask questions and receive reflections. And each sacred ground has been so incredibly impactful for us and for every single person that is there. And it is gorgeous. It is gorgeous to see how in some of them, people that have experienced physical loss of loved ones in their lives recently or a long time ago show up and all receive so much from what they need in the moment. And then in other ones, people that have experienced the loss of a relationship, a partnership, the loss of a dream, or people that are just beginning to recognize how much grief they have held inside that hasn't necessarily been recognized in the external world because it hasn't been tangible. And so Sacred Ground is this beautiful landing space for all styles of grief and all types of grief and all expressions of grief. And we really help you tap into that greater sense of expression and connection to it through what we do there. So that is my first invitation to you. On February 16th is the next Sacred Ground. Come. It is beautiful. It is on Zoom. The sign-up link will be in the show notes. And Sacred Ground is actually included as part of my Sanctuary membership. And in the Sanctuary, we are anchoring in this beautiful process that I talk about today every week. We start the month with a call that brings us into body regulation, body connection, space to start to receive these parts of us that we've been disconnected from and start to hear them and welcome them into our lives. Then there are calls like Sacred Ground Ceremony and mentorship, group mentorship. And then we end with a somatic flow to really integrate and feel into what's being shifted, what is shifting in our lives as we come into connection with our pain, as we honor it, as we make space for it, as we start to let this unraveling happen to find our true center again and then build life from there. And in December, I revamped the arc of the calls each month, and it has been awesome. It has been so beautiful to see how we can fit this entire journey into each month and guide you through the entire arc of the process of coming back to yourself, opening to greater expression, no matter how recently you have been broken open and no matter how you were broken open. And the women in the sanctuary are just my favorite ever, and we would happily welcome you in if you are ready for a weekly place to say yes to yourself, to your grief, to your fullness. If you are ready to not wait any longer for that and to be in that discovery, that is your place to land. And lastly, I have 2 spaces for one-on-one work left this winter. Reach out, apply. Everything is in the show notes. Let me see if there's anything else. I'm so excited to bring you this episode. I think the last thing is that I created a Substack recently, and I have some really special writings on there, and I will keep adding those. My podcast is also there. So if you are a Substack person and you want to listen to the show there or get in on more things, that is an awesome place to do it because it provides us a space to be able to comment back and forth and for you to be able to share your experience around it. And I would love to connect with you around it there. So again, all links will be in the show notes. I am so excited to be back in action on the show with you as 2025 begins. I can feel the grief in the life pulse of this year and how much tending and space and power will be connected to in this process. Sending my greatest love, and here you go with this raw, beautiful transmission about bringing the totality of you into the totality of your life in 2025. Okay, welcome back to Transformed by Grief. It's been a few months. I have been feeling into the podcast and as I evolve what the podcast wants to be, what it wants to evolve into, what I want to share here. And I have just taken a step back to be tapping into the pulse of what is this next iteration, what is this next season, so to speak, of Transformed by Grief, and how does that want to come through? And in the past few weeks, I've had it very clearly, like, it's time, she's ready. That first episode is coming out. And when I've sat with it, it's felt very like soft, and a part of me that I love, and also not quite it, like not the full energy of what is meant to be here and what wants to be here. And then this week, I have had a few one-on-one sessions with people that have really highlighted to me these really important aspects of what the Transformed by Grief journey, like the transformational grief journey in its totality is, and why I'm here and why I'm doing this work and what is meant to come of this for you, and this really huge fire in me to bring life back to something that has been only operating in one area of its totality. And grief work is essential in all means and in all ways. And in the way that it's known in society now, it has only been accessed and has only been brought to life in one small piece of its possibility and its totality. And more recently, there's this beautiful softness that more practitioners are bringing, and more awareness of grief, and more space to let pain in. And a huge part of my work is that. And that is not the totality of this work, because that is not the totality of you and who you are. And today, in one of my sessions, I was reminded of this beautiful journey that this person that I've worked with for a while has been on. And we got to sit in this one-on-one space together after a while of not having had one-on-one sessions. And the totality of the journey was so incredibly alive. And it was like, yes, this is what's missing. This is what our souls are craving. This is what is wanting to be invited into the space. The women that I work with and the women that I am called to serve and am in and of myself as well are women that are here for really big things. We have, since we were young, known that there is a bigness in us that cannot be denied. And circumstance, usually pain of sorts with our family of origin, painful circumstances we've lived through, grief, death, loss, in all realms that was alive in our early life and not given space, caused us to move into a place of being where our more executive parts were full on needed. Our more in the spiritual world, healing world, you might call it, like the divine masculine or the wounded masculine. Our more masculine parts, our more masculine intellectual, academic, follow through, be firm, be tough, be hard, be strong. These parts were required for survival. And we became them by accident because we did not know any better. And this might look like having been an incredible student and a lot of perfectionism and holding up the values of a culture, whether it be your family culture or your greater community's culture. It might look like having been really correct and not letting loose much and not really feeling like there was space for you to let loose much or to let this wild side come alive. And if the wild side did come alive, it felt very scary, it felt very unsafe, and it felt like it needed to be hidden. And this probably wasn't conscious. And yet, the women that I work with that have been called into my work, that have been called into this place of bringing their totality to life again, they're badass people with incredible dreams, incredible desires, businesses they want to bring to life, leadership businesses they want to bring to life, families they want to create. There is no part of them that wants to or is willing to sacrifice the quality of life that they have in their heart. And yet, by walking in this kind of one dimension in ourselves, this dimension of us that's been almost overdeveloped, like a muscle gets overdeveloped if you overuse it. And there's an imbalance between your muscles if you overdevelop one muscle and don't develop another, or if you develop one and don't develop another. And if you don't have the training and the attention on the other. just like these muscles, this very intellectual, very handle it all, be strong, be the one that creates safety, that creates a structure, that holds it all together, that has everything under control, gets overbuilt, overdeveloped, and there comes a moment in time in our lives, and usually this begins. There are let's see, like you can sense it before it comes, but then there's this big catastrophic moment of some kind, a diagnosis of yourself or somebody in your family, a breakup of some kind, a move, a loss of a pregnancy, the inability to get pregnant. A million different types of grief and loss can happen that break us open and bring us to this moment of, I can't live like this anymore. The LA fires could have been that for somebody. I can't live like this anymore. I, on the outside, am looking strong and looking like I have it all together. And on the inside, I feel hollow. I feel empty. I feel like not all of me is here. I don't feel in my body. I don't feel pleasure. I also don't feel pain. I just feel kind of numb. And I'm operating in this place of like some part of me is telling me that there is so much more of me and so much more of life. And yet I have nowhere to look. I have no idea where to find that. And yet I can't live like I am anymore. And this, I'm thinking of the word in Spanish, which is quebra, or like this broken, it's like the separation. I like to imagine it as if it were an earthquake. This separation of lands forms between you, of this moment of realizing like, yeah, this isn't me, or maybe it's not all of me. And I could keep living like this, but I am not in my totality. I am not alive. I am not fully here, fully alive. I am not living in the vision of what my heart knows it is here to live. I am not living in the creation of life that my being on a deep level knows that I came here to create. I'm living in structures that are implemented and that I've been told I need to follow. I'm living in ways of being that keep everybody else okay, and that makes me feel safe. But I feel dead inside. I feel blah. There's not a whole lot happening in the inner realms. And I'm not willing to keep going like this anymore. And so this moment happens, this moment that brings us to this really, it can feel like a rock bottom in many ways. This bottom of, I don't even know what's next. I don't know where to turn, but I just know that this is not it. And some part of me is telling me that I must say yes and believe that there is more, even though I am terrified about what needs to happen in order to explore that. And I don't even know how to begin to believe that. But there's something deep within me that's like, yeah, there's more. There's something else. There's more. And so in this broken open moment, this awareness comes alive that there is more of you. There is more to life. There is more potential. And at the same time, you're probably processing immense grief, which probably has not had space in your life before and feels like it overcomes you totally. And it also doesn't feel really good. Grief doesn't feel great. It is beautiful and you can learn to honor it. And in the moment of it, it doesn't feel really good. And so these broken open moments, these severances from our old life and who we used to be and the ways we used to walk begin to become really clear. And the ways that we are not living in our totality begin to come really clear. It like holds up a mirror to our life and to us and says, is this who you really are? Is this who you really want to be? Is this life how you want to keep living? So just take a moment to check in with that. Where and how is that happening in you? Where and how has that happened in your life? Have you had the space to fully lean into it or not? And so as that old imagery of life begins to shatter, and I've talked about this process a lot, this shattering, this release that happens, as this old idea of life begins to shatter, this limited idea of life begins to shatter and begins to fall apart. It's deeply painful. And this is where the grief journey begins. Like for me, this began in this moment of I can't live like this anymore. That opening brought me to the awareness of all of the grief that I had been harboring and suppressing for so long. That was really just trying to call me back to myself, call me back to these other parts of me, call me back to this complexity. And yes, the circumstances of my life were extremely difficult, extremely painful. It's not like everything was just magically all well and good again. I think this one. And so hold on, I want to make sure I'm going the right place. Yes, I think I am. So it's not like life is just all of a sudden magical because you decide this. There's a whole ton of you, a whole ton of conditioning, a whole ton of old expectations and old beliefs and old ways of being and old identities. Ultimately, this is an incredible identity shift. It is the beginning of an identity shift. It is the opening through which the totality of your true identity can begin to walk through the door, whereas before the door wasn't even open. And the shift starts happening. And it is messy. And there is a lot to grieve. And there is a lot of loss to honor. And there is this invitation in the process of grief to find safe places, safe people, safe ways to truly let yourself feel. And in the overdevelopment of our very masculine energy, the women that I work with have also, in that process, not developed their feminine energy, not had space, not had guidance, not had permission, not felt the safety and the containment that was necessary for them to truly let their emotion, their spirituality, their creativity, maybe they have tapped into those things in certain moments, but to truly let them be alive and thriving, their intuition, and a huge part of this kind of rich, honey, gooey, golden part of themselves, that's actually what they've been missing. And maybe you've even noticed this in yourself where you have gone looking to change things in your life, relationships, jobs, etc. And what you're actually really missing is this essential part of yourself. And it's not until you've tried all the things and tried to, change your body, tried to, change something in your marriage or in your friendships, or let go of this toxic person, or put up more boundaries here in your job. And those are all incredibly beautiful things. And they don't always fill the place that we're really yearning for. And there's this whole, it's like a whole portal, a whole nother world, this treasure chest that has no end, that is invited to come alive in the process of grieving. If you're willing to listen to this
spectacular, that's what I was going to say, spectacular moment, this breakthrough moment of something big is happening here, and I am unwilling to deny myself of this process. I am unwilling to deny myself of this journey, this exploration. I don't have another option anymore. I've tried everything else. I have to listen to this. So as long as you can do that, as long as you can say yes to this really messy, really scary, it's really easy to say no to because it freaks the ego, it freaks the mind out so much. It brings so much fear. So much fear. It can feel paralyzing until you find the right people and places, practitioners, community to really support you in this. And this is why I do what I do, because so much as you are grieving is asking to come alive. So much in your grief is like the bottle with the secret message in it, or the message in, the grief is the bottle, but the message is all of these parts of you that have been denied, all of this expression, all of this emotion, all of this wisdom, all of this intuitive knowing, all of this connection to God and the divine, and to spirit, all of the sexuality, all of this just rich, deep, chocolatey, gooey, yummy energy. And our grief gets to be the container in our life, the circumstance in our life that allows us to begin to reconnect ourselves with these parts of us, if we let it be. And in order to do that, we have to say yes. We have to say, I am willing to slow down. I am willing to find spaces. I am willing to ask somebody to watch my kids. I am willing to take a weekend away. I am willing to carve out an hour in my week to talk to Ellie or whomever else as I work with them. I am willing to say yes on Sundays, to show up to sacred ground, to let tea come into my body, to let myself slow down, to let myself feel all of this. Because the totality of my essential nature is alive here, and I have been yearning for this for decades. I am not willing to deny myself of myself anymore. I am not willing to compromise and to choose a life that feels empty to me. There's nothing wrong with that life, but it is not the life that holds the totality of who I am. And that is what I am here for. And as we attend to the grief, as we say over and over and over again, because this takes time, this takes allowing your system to begin to be comfortable with allowing this massive, juicy, full, expressive part of you back into your body, back into your life. We have to titrate that. We have to trickle. It's like one drop at a time, 1 hour at a time. And as it starts to drop in, as we drop in, as I guide you, or whomever, wherever, whatever you're doing, as you are guided to drop in and welcome more drops of you in, I'm getting this image of like this incredibly huge vat of honey. But you know, when honey's been sitting in the cold for a long time, it's like this 5-gallon pail. And if you or I are to look at that much honey, it's like, that is a lot of honey. And I could never imagine all of that being used. And because it feels heavy and it feels stiff and it feels full of sweetness. And also I can't really access it. Like I can't get my spoon into it. But as you take the 5-gallon pail of honey and you start to let it drop into this warm, loving bath of water, and you say, there's no rush. There's nothing to force. I'm not going to shove my fork into you over and over and over again and try and make a hole. I'm not going to try and pull you out when you're not ready. I'll just sit here with you and let you soften. And as the honey starts to feel your presence, as the honey starts to feel the presence of the bathtub, the presence of the warm water, it just begins to be engulfed with the sense of, oh, this massive exhale comes through my body. This sense of, okay, I don't have to be stiff and hard and held in by this hard plastic container anymore. Protected. I also don't have to rush or try and get anywhere. I can just melt. I can soften. I can be. And I can just let the water do its job. I can let the water soften me.
So there's this moment where this broken open time makes way for grief to become the invitation to welcome these parts of you that have not had space into life back. The grief becomes the container. The grief becomes the envelope. It becomes the sacred messenger that says there's more of you here. And as you say yes to that, as you say, yes, I'm going to give this space. Yes, I'm going to give this time. Yes, I can feel the life that's living in this, even though maybe all around me it looks like death, or what I have just experienced is the physical death of a loved one, or what I have just experienced is destruction outside of me due to fire, due to a natural disaster, due to the fallout of a relationship. And yet, I can feel it. If I get still, there's some kind of pulse of life here that I don't understand, that I don't quite, know how to put into words. And the call of that pulse tells me I must listen. And as you do, and as we do, and as we create space for grief, and as we begin to allow the warm waters of the grief bath come around us, as we're held by practitioners that know how to create space for that, as we're held in community, as we are, and held is sometimes, I'm not going to go into that right now, but sometimes it's not quite the right word, but contained. As we are contained in love, contained in reverence, contained in honoring, contained in belief that what is here is important, and it is also not the end. And so, as you can be comforted, as you can feel safe, as you can feel contained in that, there is space for creativity, space for greater expression, for the energy that has been alive in the emotion that you have not had space to feel to come to the surface, and in that to be liberated, and therefore to create space in you for new dimensions of yourself you haven't gotten to know yet. You haven't been able to meet. You haven't been able to invite to the foreground of life yet.
And more and more of this divine feminine and feminine energy can start to come into life, drop by drop, session by session, week by week, month by month. Meditation by meditation. Tease it by tease it. Conversation by conversation. And it goes on. And sometimes in the process of doing this, because the women that I work with have been so overdeveloped, hyper-developed in this more masculine energy in their life, and in those strengths, it can feel necessary to bring the focus and bring the attention to the feminine for a while. In the grief and in the grieving and in the release of what used to be, we have deconstructed the old realities of living in that unhealthy, masculine-driven way for you. And in that process, and in reorienting towards what the grief is asking you to come into relationship with, what the grief is inviting to the surface, it might feel sometimes like and I'm burping, and I always burp when there's energy release. Like, it might feel sometimes like you're coming into focus of the feminine and the masculine doesn't feel like it's there anymore. And momentarily, that can feel good. It can feel necessary. It might also feel a little bit scary. And that is just one phase of this, because it is necessary to give the parts that have been underdeveloped luscious space and timing, to really listen to them, to really invite them in, to really hear what they're saying. To really know how they want to live, to really know how they want to be alive in your life, how they are alive in your life, and maybe you haven't noticed them or seen them or felt like you could incorporate them into your friendship or your relationships or into your work. Or into the way you dress, the way you keep your house or your home, the way you determine anything and everything. And so this refocusing happens to bringing attention to the parts that have been underdeveloped. And over time, what happens is that begins to be developed. And this part of you that feels wholly soulful becomes kind of part of your everyday, part of who you are. And yet it is still not the whole picture. It is a deeply important part of the picture. The picture cannot be complete without it. But once this part is online, this feminine expression, this connection with creativity, this interaction, this fluidity with the divine, this creative pulse and spark, this emotional freedom and emotional safety and emotional fluidity, and ownership of all of that. Once that becomes embodied, something really powerful, it already feels powerful, but something even more powerful is ready with time to come online. And so today, what became so clear in this journey of the totality and the journey of the totality of the journey that came up in my one-on-one session with this client was, if we sit with these two parts of us, this very, in our early years, developed masculine, strong. We know how to get shit done. We know how to do what you've got to do. We know how to show up when it matters. We know how to put everything on the line, to risk it all for the people we love, for the things we believe in, and for what we really care about. We know how to show up to that moment. And also now, we are developed in our softness, in our sensitivities, with ownership of them, with delight in them, enjoying them, feeling the pleasure that is alive in there, feeling the life that is alive in us. Feeling the way our hips sway, and it feels better to walk around without a bra. That's mainly just me. That's not necessarily you, but your version of whatever that is. The way you like to feel and be in your body, the way you like to feel and be in your home, the way you like to feel and treat yourself, the way you like to feed yourself, the way you are in connection to your heart and your emotions, the space you give them because you know that there is richness in them, and so much more. That part is alive fully too. And so we did this exercise with my client where, if you've ever been in the sanctuary with me or done one-on-one work with me, sometimes we do an energetic process of kind of drawing up these two energies outside of ourselves and like really pulling them out so we are a neutral vessel, and noticing how our systems want to interact or respond to these two full energies. They have their own bubbles, and they give us images and show us what they want to show us. And we get to first just sit and notice like what our neutral energy field does when we give these two energies space. And then we get to invite them to talk to each other. We get to say, what does this masculine energy want to say to this feminine energy? And what does this feminine energy want to say to this masculine energy? And if you're not from the spiritual healing world, and these are new terms, this has nothing to do with gender. This is a way of playing with the polarization of energy and the embodiment of the totality of the human experience. But when we sit back and let them speak, when they are full, when both of those energies are full and online, guess what happens? As my client said today, she said, at first they looked at each other and said, we are opposites. And then they looked at each other and said, no, but we are one. The truth of these energies is that they are here to entwine together. They are here to be deeply complementary. They are here to hold each other, to have the masculine go out and create and fight for this beautiful life, and not even fight, but advocate for this beautiful containment of life, the places that are going to feel good, the people that are going to feel good, the structures that are going to allow the feminine to blossom and be in her total expression. And from this, when we are in this energy of allowing both of these to be together, to this divine marriage, this intertwinement of our totality, the people that we begin to be able to invite in from there relate to us on a whole nother level, because we are in deep relationship with all of us. And grief in this place has a continuous space, because grief does not end. And grief has just alivened and awakened and invited in all of these parts of us that now get to support us in the long-term expression of our grief journeys. Whether you call it a life journey or a grief journey or grief entwined in life, it doesn't matter. However you name it. This is not just for people that have lost loved ones. As I've spoken about so much, it doesn't really matter
what the broken open moment, what the severance was. For everybody, that will be different, and we have zero control over that. I have worked with many people that have lost many, many close people, and then one little thing, and it's not little, but it seems little in comparison to that, is what breaks the straw that breaks the camel's back, so to speak. So we don't get to choose when this happens, but it is a cosmically orchestrated, I believe, divinely orchestrated moment. And the long term of this journey is allowing the totality of us to work together, to blend, to call in, and then to create outside of us, inside and outside of us, a balanced world. Imagine allowing all of this badass executive abilities that you have, whether you have ADHD, like what's coming up right now is, yeah, but I have ADHD. Yeah, I have some ADHD too. You still have some badass executive abilities. Like your intellect is still highly developed. Imagine bringing all of those beautifully developed parts of you and also bringing your soft, sensual, creative, intuitive, spiritual. I mean, the masculine is still spiritual. There's nobody that isn't or can't be spiritual. I believe that everybody is. But imagine allowing the flow energy that I talk about so much to merge with the intellect, to merge with the executive. They are not pinned against each other. We do not need to abandon one. Maybe on the journey, in order to get to this place, we do. But we don't ultimately need to say bad or turn away from one. We just need to allow ourselves to develop what has been underdeveloped and then allow them to reconnect and to work together. Just imagine for a moment allowing all of these parts of you in your life and feel the fullness, feel the energy, feel the life, the vitality that lives in that. Like, whoa, my hands are tingling. My energetic field feels bigger, fuller. The way I'm looking at the world, the way I'm looking at what I want to do, the way I'm looking at the people in front of me, the way I'm interacting, the way I'm bringing myself into spaces is completely different. The trust I have in myself to show up no matter what's happening is infinite. The trust I have in myself to make the right decision for me, to know what's right for a certain moment, even though I can't see the full picture and there's no way I can know if it's really, really right. But the trust that I have in that is so beyond anything that anyone ever could have told me was possible. And so I think about these women that have these big dreams, that have not only big dreams, they are people of service. They are here to support and lead and guide and create something that is nourishing to the whole of humanity. They are here to do their part in bringing a new world alive, a world that is kinder, more filled with love, more understanding, more compassionate, more peaceful. And once these two energies come together, to me, it feels like there's no stopping that. To me, it feels like we don't have to be afraid of, there might be fear, there probably will be fear, because the ego, the mind, is going to be part of this the whole time. So we're going to be actively working with all of that the whole time. There's not a moment as humans where we transcend fear. And if you feel like you're transcending fear, let's talk. Like, I was standing at the top of a black diamond
a ski run a week ago, which I should not have been at the top of. And I was filled with so much fear because I had just gone down this ski run where I had fallen a lot and gotten trapped in a terrain park that I shouldn't have been in. And it was really icy and really embarrassing. And so I stupidly got on the chairlift again and went to the top for the next one. And as I was standing there, I was filled with fear. And I was frozen in fear. And thankfully it was sunset, so I just kind of turned around. We were at the top of this hill so I could see the sunset perfectly. And I looked at the sunset and it looked gorgeous. And I just breathed and tears started to fill my goggles. And I realized I just need space to let this emotion flow. I'm not going to be able to move past my fear in any moment. I'm not going to be able to override this unless I give myself space for all of this emotion that's accumulated with it to come forth. So I just sat there and cried and took some breaths and then sat down and cried because I was scared and I didn't want to get started on this black diamond that I should not be on. It's not that I shouldn't be there, but I wasn't at the skill level for somebody that naturally would go there. So what am I trying to say here? If I would have just pushed past that fear, I would have overridden and totally disconnected from all of these parts of me, all of these revelations that were coming up, all of this richness that was alive in the experience. That when because I just had, it's not a simple thing, but because I have developed the trust in myself to be able to let those things move through, my masculine was able to say, we're going to do this, but you can take your time. And I trust in our abilities. And my feminine was able to come through and cry and say, I'm scared. I don't know how to do this. I want to turn around so badly. And that's not even necessarily my feminine. That's almost more like my inner child. But just the feminine allowed her to soften. That part of me is free to take up space within myself. And once we can do that within ourselves, we start to be able to take up that space in the world. And then the way that we lead, guide, and interact changes. And it's important to say that not every circumstance that somebody experiences will feel perfectly like every part of them is alive in that moment. And that is okay. With the client I talked to today, there's a circumstance where it didn't feel like her wild side could come to the surface for a lot of reasons that were out of her control. And her masculine, her structured, her studious, her attention to detail, really focused part really needed to thrive in that moment and did. And yet she also noticed, yeah, I can do this for a little while and this is totally okay. And this is not the fullness of life that I know that is available to me. And so I'm going to let this circumstance, this time frame be here, and I'm going to move with it. And maybe out in the outer world, I need to show up with a lot of determination and a lot of strength. And the feminine has determination and strength too. It's just a different frequency. It's a different hum of energy than what's often requested to us from the world. And so maybe in those circumstances, in those moments, in those time frames where you just have to show up, you're kind of in survival mode, but more embodied than survival mode. You have to let those parts do their job and take over, and thank God for them. And maybe the moment you get to calm, to safety, You know how to tend to transition back into, to invite in these softer, more fluid parts. If you're in a female body, how you touch yourself, how you feed yourself, how you speak to yourself are all part of that. And so I could go on, and in order to not repeat myself, I'm going to begin to conclude, but just take a breath here and feel into the totality of the possibilities. Grief is awakening everywhere all around us in our world right now. I was on a walk yesterday and I could just feel it. The pulse of grief awakening, like this spring of grief happening. This long winter of keeping it suppressed and dormant is no longer. It's going to be less and less able to, we are going to be less and less able to push it down, hold it back. And yet so many see it. One of my mentors said to me not that long ago, you've chosen a really interesting area to work, Ellie, because so many people think that they won't get anything out of engaging with it. That they might as well avoid it, get it done quick, whatever it is. And I just sat there dumbfounded, because if you've connected with anything that I've just shared with you, the richness, the vitality, the vibrancy of your life and being is available to you when you say yes to your grief. Your grief is the sacred messenger, no matter what you're grieving. So, where are you now? Are you willing to receive the sacred message? What is the grief saying to you? What is it asking for? What is it inviting you into? Who and what are all these parts of you that are asking and saying, pleading and yearning to come into life, and that you are yearning to bring into life? And are you ready to say yes to them? I promise they are there. This is the totality of you. This is the doorway to the totality of you. This is a doorway to the totality of you. It is a sacred doorway. It is not without its messiness. We must give space to the pain that has kept all of this energy in you locked away, so that that can be freed. And when I say alchemize pain to find your power, that's what I'm talking about. So I invite you in. I invite you in to meet your experience as it is now, and to let it invite you in to these parts of you that are yearning to come forth, and that you have been yearning for, whether you've realized it or not. I invite you to join sacred ground, to join the sanctuary. Sacred ground is included in the sanctuary, if you're ready to join the sanctuary. I invite you into one-on-one work. I invite you to just go back and listen to all of the beautiful episodes of the show, if that is your starting place. I invite you to start to breathe into your heart and to feel into the places and spaces that are calling you, the places and spaces that are inviting these parts of you in. By you going through this process, you are not only rebuilding your own inner and then outer life, you are awakening the leadership that you carry in you. You are bringing new life to the world around us, to your immediate family and friends and community, to your home, to your greater community, and to the world. And we need you.
Love to hear how this lands. Take your time to integrate and process, and I will be back with you soon. Thank you for listening to Transformed by Grief. Please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and to share it with a loved one that needs this medicine today. If you are ready to deepen into your own Transformed by Grief process, you can join the Sanctuary membership or work with me one-on-one at ellieflow.com. See you soon.